so grateful that you guys are here today. And one of the things we say around here all the time is Hope City is a place where you can belong before you believe. And so if you are a guest today, we're extremely grateful that you're here. And just know that we hope that you feel welcome and at home. And hope you hang out, take that connection card back to Guest Central, trade it in for a coffee mug. And we'd love to meet you this week. Well, we are in this teaching series called Rise Up. And we've been talking over the last few weeks about things that we want to be different in our life in 2018, and how we want 2018 to be a different year than 2017, 2016. And the very first week, we talked about how we need to rise up from our past. So if we are bringing our past into our present, it's going to affect our future. And then the next week, we talked about rising up from loneliness and how none of us are designed to do life alone, that God has created us for relationship. And the tension that we feel in life is we are drawn to isolation, but yet we desire connection. And so we have these things called connection groups that we want every single person that attends Hope City to try to be a part of. And we wanted to try to push you guys into being brave enough to join connection groups. And so if you haven't been able to do that over the last couple weeks, you can still do that on several of our groups. Still have some space in it. A few of them are closed. They're totally full. But you can find more information about that at Guest Central. And then last week, Trish did an amazing job talking about Esther and this whole idea of rising up over our fears. And, the first week of the series, we ended the service by writing down on Post-it notes things that we wanted to rise up against. And during the last song, we just walked around these walls and just put these Post-it notes up. And it's very interesting going through these. Obviously, there's no names on it, which is awesome because people could actually be honest and vulnerable. And fear was on there. Money, finances were on there. Broken relationships were mentioned in these. Parental relationships, rising up over my bitterness towards my dad was on there. Rising up over loneliness was on there, trying to develop relationships. But the most common repeated thing, I think 7 or 8 different people wrote insecurity. Insecurity. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have our greeters come, and we're going to hand you an index card as we start today. And I want you to take a minute. Nobody's going to see this but you, okay? This is just between you and God. You just take an index card, and during the course of the message, I want you to write down one thing that you feel insecure about. One thing. It could be your appearance. It could be a relationship. It could be your job. One thing that you feel like you're just unsure of, that you're just not really confident in. And here's why this is important, because the guiding question that we've been asking this series is, do I like who I'm becoming? Right? And if we're going to make changes in our life, we have to answer this question. Do you like who you're becoming? Not do you like how you behave, not do you like how you act, not do you like how you pretend to be, but do you like who you're becoming as a person? And in order to be all that God has created us to be, the first step into rising up against insecurity is identifying what we're insecure about. It's just being honest. It's just being real. It's just saying, okay, God, here's one thing where I just don't feel confident. Here's one thing where I just don't feel put together. And here's how I would define insecurity. Insecurity is uncertainty or anxiety about oneself. That's not how I would define it. This is how Webster defines it. Uncertainty or anxiety about oneself, a lack of confidence. So what is one area in your life where you just don't have confidence? What's one area in your life where you just don't feel secure? Write that down, and we're going to do something with that at the very end of the message that I'm really excited about. It's not going to be public. It's going to be kind of a private thing. But do you remember the first time that you felt insecure? Remember the first time that you felt unsure, the first time you felt anxious about your appearance or about your behavior or about your perception by how other people perceived you? I'll never forget the first time I ever felt insecure. And I wish I knew how old I was. I was under 5th grade because we still lived in this little town called Ladoga. We moved to Crawfordsville when I was in 5th grade, going into my 5th grade year. And so I know it was before I was in 5th grade. So I think it was sometime after 2nd grade and before 5th grade that I was in town riding bikes with a group of friends, and I had on shorts, and I'm guessing they were probably short shorts because it was the early 80s, and short shorts were like really in. And so one of the kids that I was riding bikes with said to me, Justin, your legs are really skinny. And then another kid said, you have chicken legs. And then all of these kids started calling me chicken legs. Like for the next couple of weeks, every time I saw these kids, even at school, they called me chicken legs, chicken legs, chicken legs, chicken legs. And I had never felt insecure about my appearance before. I never knew I needed to be embarrassed about something before. But I got super insecure about my appearance. I got super insecure about my chicken legs. And I went on in this stage of life for the next year or two, I don't remember how long, where I refused to wear shorts. Now, I would give $1,000 to be called chicken legs right now, all right? If I had skinny legs right now, I would give way too much money to be called that right now, because it's amazing how your things change over time, right? The things that you struggle with now, we got into a little conversation with our kids about the words that they use and how when they tell dad he needs to work out and get off the couch and that he's fat, it hurts his feelings, okay? And so you never know how things are going to shift and change on what you feel insecure about. But can you remember the first time that you felt embarrassed, the first time that you felt unsure of yourself? How about the last time? Remember the last time you felt insecure? The last time you felt anxious? The last time you felt like you didn't measure up? See, I wish that my insecurity ended in 4th grade, but it just moved into other areas of my life. I've been insecure for so much of my life. About my looks, about my bank account, about the cars I've owned, the houses I've lived in, the grades I got, the behavior of my kids, the appearance of my kids, the success of my ministry, the health of my marriage. I'm actually feeling insecure about how insecure I am right now. Right? We have this tendency to be insecure people. We have this tendency to take the focus off of God and place it on us. And what we don't see are our strengths and our gifts. We see our deficiencies and our inadequacies. And those things tend to guide the decisions and guide our relationships and guide the depth of our relationship with God. Well, I didn't intend for this to happen, but a few weeks ago when we started this series, we started by talking about Moses. And then next week I came back and I said, I really like Moses. I told you I like Moses. And so we talked about Moses again. Then last week Trish talked about Esther. And then this week I'm coming back to Moses because I just like Moses. And so this is going to be a character study. This series is going to be a character study on the person of Moses. But I want to talk about Moses because he demonstrates, as I sat down and started thinking through some of the lies that insecurity tries to tell us, he faced some of those same lies that you and I face today. And so we're going to read this passage of Scripture. It's going to set up kind of the trajectory of the message today and where we're going to go. But we're going to read about Moses being called by God and then how Moses responds once he's called by God. And the format of today's message is going to be, I'm going to talk about kind of the lies that insecurity tries to feed us and then the truth about what security says in our life. Okay, so let's follow along. Exodus chapter 3. If you don't have a Bible, you can follow along on the screen. You can download the Hope City app, and all of the message notes are on the Hope City app. Just search Hope City Indy in either the Google Play or the App Store, and it's right there. It says this. This kind of sets up what we're going to talk about. Verses 1 through 10 of Exodus chapter 3. One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. So if you remember from week 1, Moses has killed an Egyptian. He's ran into captivity, not into captivity, he's ran into isolation. He's given himself a life sentence that he is no longer going to be a leader. He's no longer going to be worthy to be in the house of Pharaoh. He's going to be a sheep herder for his father-in-law in the country of Midian. And so that's what he's been doing for the last 40 years. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it did not burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't this bush burning up? I must go see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush. Moses, Moses. Here I am, replied Moses. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because they are harsh slave drivers. I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land of where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of my people, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead the people out of Egypt. So there's this epic moment in Moses' life where he has been on cruise control. He has resigned himself that he is no longer going to be of use to God, to the nation of Israel. He is in hiding in a land where he doesn't think anybody's going to find him. And it's incredible to think about how no matter how much you mess up in life, no matter how many mistakes you and I make in life, God goes searching for us. Moses goes deep into the wilderness and God finds him there. Moses is herding sheep for his father-in-law in Midian and God finds him there. God pursues him. And God does the same thing for us. No matter how long you've been away from God, no matter how far you feel from God, God goes searching. And the way that I would define insecurity is I would take it a step further from how Webster's defines it. And I think insecurity as it pertains to our life is it's a gap between who you are and who you want to be or who you think others want you to be. Like when you and I feel insecure, it's probably because there's this gap between who you are and who you know that you are and who you want to be. You are a person that weighs 175 pounds and you want to be a person that weighs 140 pounds. Right? You are a person that's really impatient and really short-tempered with your family, and you want to be a person that is patient and really kind to your family. Right? There's this gap between who you are and who you want to be, or there's this gap between who you are and who others think you should be, who your wife thinks you should be, who your boss thinks you should be, and so this insecurity floods over you. And as Moses is having this conversation with God, he cannot focus on the task that God is asking him to complete. All he can focus on is his deficiencies. All he can focus on is the gap between who he is and who God thinks he should be. There is no way Moses sees himself as the leader of the nation of Israel. And so all of this insecurity just starts pouring out of Moses' mouth. And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at 4 statements that Moses makes, 4 lies that insecurity tries to teach us, and then 4 truths of security. So the first one is this. Insecurity says, well, who am I? Insecurity says, who am I? Exodus chapter 3, verse 11, Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh, and who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? I want you to think about it. This is one of the coolest moments in the Old Testament. Like God sets up some pyrotechnics. God goes out of the ordinary. God could have wooed Moses. God could have spoken to Moses. God could have gotten Moses' attention in a number of different ways. He sets a bush on fire that does not get consumed. And then once he notices that, it's kind of cool because I don't know about you, but like 4th of July, I lose my mind. All right, I love fire. I love burning things. I love setting things on fire. The most favorite part of our Christmas Eve service wasn't the life change that happened for me. It was the fire pit that we had out in front, okay? There's tons of visitors, tons of guests. We had an amazing holy moment in here. And what was I talking about on Instagram? The fire pit. What did I say to our team afterwards? I'm like, I want to have 4 fire pits next year, all right? I was so enamored with the fire. And so God knows, hey, Moses is a guy. He's probably going to be impressed by fire. Let's set something on fire. But it doesn't get consumed. And so once God sees that Moses is enamored with this fire, he speaks to him. Now, we just read that and we just casually read over it, but Moses was not a priest. Moses wasn't a religious leader. Moses was not a prophet. Moses was a murderer. Moses was a fugitive. Moses was on the run. And God brings his presence into the life of Moses in such a way that once Moses realizes that it's God, he hides his face. Like it's so audacious, right? God performs this incredible miracle, and all Moses can say is, who am I? Who am I, God, that I would speak before Pharaoh? Who am I that I would lead the nation of Israel? Have you ever been there in your own life? You're scrolling through Facebook, you see somebody's epic vacation, or you see somebody that got a promotion, or you see somebody that has their arms around the people that they love, and you just start thinking, well, who am I? Who am I that I should want a better job? Who am I that I think I deserve a better marriage? Who am I that I think I need to be or that I'm worthy of being in a close relationship with God? You see, when you and I start to think about who am I, comparison begins to live in our heart. We start comparing our life to everybody else because we say, well, who are they? Look who they are compared to who I am. Look who they are compared to what I have. Look what they have. Insecurity says, he is I am. Security says, he is I am. And what begins to happen in our life is we start comparing everybody's highlight reel to our real life. And I don't know if you know this or not, but what you see online is fake. Right? Like, there have been times we have posted a family picture right after we've gotten done arguing about people smiling in the picture. Just smile, please. Just no stupid faces right now, no silly faces right now. Just smile. Everyone look happy right now. Okay, let's post that bad boy, right? Like that's what we're comparing ourselves to. We see everybody's highlight reel, then we feel horrible about our own life, right? But when you stop comparison, what you begin to say is, he is I am. Look at verse 14 and 15. God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. What we miss here in the English translation is God's name was so holy there was no name for him. And so this is the best effort that we have as humans of translating who God is. I am. What is he? He is everything. I am. I am, you fill in the blank, that's what he is. This is a human expression of who God is, and God is saying, hey, stop focusing on who you are, or more importantly, who you're not, and start focusing on who I am. Who am I? I am who I am. God is reminding Moses of his faithfulness, not Moses' ability. And you want to know how to overcome insecurity and comparison? Realize that God is way more faithful than you are capable. You're not capable to be the husband that God's called you to be. You're not capable to be the wife that God's called you to be. You know who is? God is. And so as you give over your insecurity to him, what he gives you is more of himself. And he allows us to grow into the men and women that he's called us to be. He is the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. It's a declaration of his faithfulness. He's reminding Moses how faithful he's been in the past to give him confidence that he will be faithful in the future. Second lie that we are told with insecurity. Insecurity says, I don't have what it takes. Insecurity says, I don't have what it takes. Chapter 4, verse 10 of Exodus says, but Moses pleaded with the Lord. This whole argument goes on for like 2.5 chapters. Moses pleaded with the Lord, oh Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled. Now, as many of you guys know, Trish and our whole family made this decision this summer to adopt our 10-year-old son and our 8-year-old daughter. And it was like one of the most surest things that we've ever done, one of the most scariest things that we've ever done, and one of the most faith-inspiring, faith-filled things that we've ever done. And it did not make sense, and yet it made perfect sense. And it happened within 3 weeks. So it was this whirlwind, and many of you guys were around for that journey. And once we made the decision to adopt the kids, we became legal guardians of them within 21 days of actually meeting them, which is kind of crazy. And so we post this online, right? And all these people start trying to encourage us. And they said things like, those kids hit the parent jackpot. Those kids are so blessed. Those kids are going to grow up with such loving parents. Those kids are going to grow up in an amazing home. And everyone said that with good intentions of encouraging us because we were scared out of our minds. And I'll never forget laying in bed, rehearsing some of those statements in my mind. And I even said to Trish one night, we were laying there and I said, what if we don't have what it takes? Like, what if we've used up all of our parent mojo on our 3 other kids? Like, what if we don't have what it takes to raise these kids? What if we're too old for this? What if we don't have the capacity to love them like they need to be loved, or help them heal like they need to heal, or help them find, God the way that they need to find God? What if we fail in this? What if we bring them into our house and they are worse off by being with us than they ever would have been not being with us? What if we have set them and our family up for failure? What if we bring them in our house and then our other kids hate us? See, I think so often when we feel prompted by God to do something, we feel prompted by God to take a step in his direction, we feel prompted by God to trust him in new ways, we feel prompted by God to rise up against something, the next feeling is, what if I don't have what it takes? What if I fail? What if I mess up? What if I can't do this? See, that's the lie of insecurity. You don't have what it takes to please your wife. You don't have what it takes to please your parents or your boss or your husband. You don't have what it takes to get that promotion, to overcome that addiction, to love God like you should. You don't have what it takes to heal from the abuse, to be the parent that God's called you to be. And that's the lie of insecurity, and insecurity says to us, God will give you what you need. God will give you what you need. Look at verse 11 and 12. It says, then the Lord said to Moses, after Moses says he's not a good speaker, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what you say. I think there's a healthy aspect to us feeling insufficient. In fact, I think if you feel qualified and capable in every aspect of your life, you're probably not trusting God enough. Insecurity and insufficiency are two different things. Insecurity is this anxiety that you're not going to be enough. Insufficiency is this realization that you're not enough. And I think God allows us to feel insufficient. God allows us to not feel like we don't have what it takes so that we'll turn to Him. The problem is, why we struggle with insecurity so much is, for the majority of us, and I'm including myself in this, a lot of the times when we feel like we don't have what it takes, we just try harder. We just worry more. We don't turn to God. We don't allow God to be more in our life. And I think the key phrase in this text is, I will be with you as you speak. Yeah, I will be with you as you speak. God isn't promising Moses that he is going to provide for him beforehand. As you're talking, Moses, I'm going to give you the words. As you're speaking, Moses, I'm going to give you the ability. As you're speaking, as you are faithful, as you're obedient, I'm going to give you everything that you don't have right now. It's not going to come beforehand. It's going to come as you speak. As you step out in your own deficiencies, then I'll be sufficient. God shows up and gives us exactly what we need to overcome our insecurity as we trust Him. Not before, as we trust Him. Number 3, insecurity says it's about getting people to accept me. Insecurity says your life is about getting people to accept you. Chapter 4, verse 1, Moses protested again. What if they don't believe me or listen to me? What if they say the Lord never appeared to you? One of the most transformative books that I've ever read is a book by a guy named Brennan Manning called Abba's Child. He wrote a book years ago called The Ragamuffin Gospel, which completely transformed my view of grace. But a few years later, he wrote a book called Abba's Child, and it's really about living in a relationship with God where you truly believe that you're loved by Him unconditionally, that you see Him as a father. And I read it in a time where I was struggling with my earthly father, so it really helped me recalibrate my perception of God as my heavenly Father. And he talks about, in chapter 2 of this book, he talks about this idea of an imposter. And how when we don't deal with insecurity in our life, we create imposters, we create false selves that become acceptable to people in different areas of our life. And so you create a work version of you, you create a friend version of you, you create a church version of you, you create a family version of you, and you put on that face, you put on that DNA, you put on that perception as you interact with those different groups of people. And his whole point is, it's constantly driven by insecurity. It's constantly driven by this idea. He said the imposter's goal is not to be fully known, it's to be known only to the degree that it helps me maintain my image or reputation or lifestyle. And then he gives these characteristics of the imposter. Listen to this. The imposter lives in fear. The imposter is preoccupied with acceptance and approval. The imposter is what he or she does. The imposter inspires us to attach value to things that have no value. The imposter is a liar. The imposter demands to be noticed. And then he says this quote, I love this. He says, imposters are preoccupied with acceptance and approval because their suffocating need to please others. They cannot say no with the same confidence with which they say yes. And so they overextend themselves in people, projects, and causes, motivated not by personal commitment, but by the fear of not living up to others' expectations. You see, when you don't deal with insecurity, you're going to be driven to please people. And the quickest way to make yourself miserable is to try to please everyone. When you're constantly running around trying to please every single person in your life, not because you love them, but because you need to be loved by them, you need their approval. And that's the disguise, isn't it? We convince ourselves that we're doing this. I love my job. I love my family. I love my wife. I love my boyfriend. We're constantly doing these things under the auspices of, I love them. What we're really doing, our true motivation is we want to receive love. And so we're overextending ourselves and we're bending over backwards and we're becoming people that were never created to be, not because we love people, because we want to receive love from people. And Security says it's about being who God has called me to be. Here's how Brennan Manning concludes this chapter. He says, we cannot accept love from another human being when we do not love ourselves, much less accept that God could possibly love us. While the imposter draws his or her identity from past achievements and the adulation of others, the true self claims identity in their belovedness. It's this reality that God loves you. No strings attached. Not because of your performance, not because of your significance, not because of your success. God has set you apart. He's given you value and significance that isn't based on your abilities. It's not based on your performance. It's not based on your achievements or your accomplishments. You're just loved. You're chosen. You're redeemed. And anytime we attach something to that, we experience insecurity. You know why? Because we're never designed to perform our way into good graces with God. We're just designed to receive God's love and then live out an overflow of that love. Finally, as we close, insecurity says, it all depends on me. It all depends on me. I put the progression of Moses' conversation with God on one slide because I want you to see how me-focused Moses. God is asking Moses to step into this epic adventure. God is asking Moses to do something completely amazing. God is asking Moses to save the nation of Israel. And here's how Moses responds. Who am I that I should go? Chapter 3, verse 11. What if they don't believe me? Chapter 4, verse 1. I'm not a very strong communicator. Chapter 4, verse 10. Please send someone else. Chapter 4, verse 13. One of the things that perpetuates insecurity in our life is the belief that we can be enough, that we can perform. And then we get insecure that we're not enough. But security says it's all about God. Security says that no matter how much you think your job is about you, no matter how much you think your marriage or your dating life is about you, no matter how much you think your friendships are about you, your whole life is about God. It's about us living in a relationship with God. It's about God forming us and shaping us and allowing us to rise up over the things that hold us back. This is how God responds. I have seen in chapter 3, verse 7. I have heard in chapter 3, verse 7. I am concerned in chapter 3, verse 7. I have come down in chapter 3, verse 8. I have seen in chapter 3, verse 9. I am sitting in chapter 3, verse 10. And then finally in Exodus chapter 3, verse 12, God says, you know what? I will be with you. And this is your sign that I'm with you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this very mountain. He's on Mount Sinai, where they received the 10 Commandments. Later on. See, overcoming insecurity isn't about you becoming more. We rise up over insecurity when we realize and embrace and live out of who God has already says we are. Let me say that again because I didn't say that right. We rise up over insecurity when we realize, embrace, and live out of who God already says we are. See, your identity isn't based on what you achieve, what you accomplish, how happy you make people. What your waist size is, what the scale says you are, how many times you work out per week. That's not your identity. And if you're trying to find your identity in those things, your performance reviews, your tax bracket, you're going to constantly feel insecure. You know why? Because God has given you an identity. He's recklessly pursued you. He's chased you down. He has said, you're my child. End of story. And I don't look at my kids differently based on their performance. My kids have to do nothing to earn my love. I love them unconditionally. And that's the same way God feels about you. He wants to trade the insecurity that you feel. And he wants to remind you that you're created in his image. You bear his name. You have value and purpose, and God has set you apart. And that is who you are. Let's pray together. God, we acknowledge that we struggle with feeling like we're enough. We struggle with trying to manipulate and manicure and massage people's perception of us. And we are miserable sometimes because of it. For some of us today, God, we're gripped with insecurity. We're insecure about a relationship that we're in. We're insecure about our job. We're insecure about what people that mean a lot to us think about us. And so we walk on eggshells. And we constantly strive to be more, to do more, to impress more. Some of us are exhausted. And so God, today we rise up over insecurity. We claim the security and the identity that you have recklessly pursued us for. We love you, God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.